60 inches of rain, a Category 4 hurricane, an entire major US city underwater, and a storm that refused to move for days. These are not fragments of fiction, but the chilling reality of Texas in 2017, when Hurricane Harvey rewrote the rules of natural disasters. What happens when a storm doesn't just hit, but lingers, grows, and overwhelms everything in its path? From explosive formation to catastrophic flooding and a recovery filled with lasting scars, this story reveals the full scale of a disaster that shocked America. Stay with us as we break down every phase of this event, and if you want more deep dive stories like this, make sure to like and subscribe. In August 2017, a seemingly routine tropical wave rolled off the coast of West Africa, barely drawing attention in a region known for spawning storms. Yet this disturbance would soon evolve into something far more dangerous. As it moved across the Atlantic Ocean, early signs of organization appeared, but hostile wind conditions briefly tore it apart, reducing it to a weak system that many forecasters believed would fade into obscurity. Instead, the system pushed forward into the Caribbean Sea, where it struggled but refused to die, holding just enough structure to survive the journey. The real turning point came when it entered the Gulf of Mexico, a region with exceptionally warm water temperatures exceeding 30 degrees Celsius, creating the perfect environment for rapid intensification. Within a shockingly short window of time, the storm reorganized, strengthened, and transformed into Hurricane Harvey, catching both residents and officials off guard. What made this phase especially alarming was the speed of escalation, as Harvey surged from a tropical storm into a Category 4 hurricane in less than 48 hours. With sustained winds reaching over 130 miles per hour, meteorologists began issuing urgent warnings, emphasizing that this was not just another storm but a system with the potential for catastrophic impact. Along the Texas coastline, communities started to brace for landfall, with emergency management agencies activating response plans and urging residents to prepare for evacuation. However, mixed messaging and uncertainty about the storm's exact path created hesitation among many people, leaving thousands in vulnerable positions. At this stage, forecasts began highlighting a critical and unusual threat, not just wind damage, but the potential for historic rainfall totals exceeding 50 inches, a number that seemed almost unreal at the time. The structure of Harvey revealed a deeply organized core, with strong convection and a stable circulation that signaled it was far from weakening. Satellite imagery showed a tightening eye and expanding rain bands, clear indicators that the storm was feeding aggressively off the Gulf's energy. As Harvey approached land, atmospheric conditions remained unusually calm above it, with minimal wind shear, allowing it to maintain its strength instead of breaking apart. This rare combination of factors turned Harvey into a near-perfect storm system, primed for destruction even before making landfall. Local authorities in Texas, especially around Houston and Southeast Texas, faced mounting pressure to make critical decisions that could impact millions of lives. Some evacuation orders were issued in coastal areas, but the scale of the threat was still not fully understood by the general public. Meanwhile, forecasts began to show something deeply concerning: a potential stall in the storm's movement after landfall, a scenario that could unleash prolonged and relentless rainfall. This possibility transformed Harvey from a dangerous hurricane into a looming disaster of historic proportions. By the time it closed in on the coast in late August 2017, it was clear that this storm was not following the usual script, and the stage was set for an event that would redefine how America understands flooding disasters, because what happened next would push an entire region beyond its limits and leave scars that would not fade anytime soon. As Hurricane Harvey made landfall along the Texas coast on the 25th of August 2017, it struck with overwhelming force, bringing violent winds and storm surge that immediately tore through coastal communities like Rockport and Port Aransas. Buildings were shredded, power grids collapsed, and entire neighborhoods were left exposed as the storm pushed inland with relentless momentum. Yet the true danger began to reveal itself not in the initial impact, but in what followed as Harvey slowed to a crawl over southeast Texas. Instead of weakening and moving on, the system stalled, trapped between competing atmospheric forces, creating a scenario that few had ever witnessed at this scale. Over the next several days, Harvey unleashed unprecedented rainfall totals, exceeding 60 inches in some areas, turning roads into rivers and cities into vast floodplains. In Houston, the fourth largest city in the United States, the situation escalated rapidly as water levels rose faster than emergency crews could respond. Entire freeways disappeared beneath murky water, homes filled to their rooftops, and critical infrastructure failed under the sheer volume of flooding. The scale of the disaster became staggering as tens of thousands of residents were trapped, many forced to climb onto roofs or retreat into attics to escape the rising water. Rescue operations intensified, with over 17,000 people saved through coordinated efforts involving the U.S. Coast Guard, local authorities, and civilian volunteers using small boats. Social media became an unexpected lifeline as stranded individuals posted their locations, hoping someone would reach them before it was too late. Hospitals struggled to operate under extreme conditions, evacuating patients while dealing with power outages and flooded access routes. Airports shut down, halting all flights, and major highways became impassable, effectively isolating large parts of the region. The flooding extended far beyond urban areas, overwhelming rivers and reservoirs across eastern Texas, forcing controlled water releases that added to the already catastrophic conditions downstream. As days passed, the storm continued to draw moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, feeding a cycle of constant rain that refused to break. Entire communities were swallowed by water, with some neighborhoods remaining submerged for days on end. The psychological toll began to mount as families realized the full extent of what they were losing: homes, vehicles, and irreplaceable memories disappearing beneath the floodwaters. In some areas, rainfall in just a few days exceeded what would normally fall over an entire year, a statistic that underscored the extreme nature of the event. Emergency shelters filled beyond capacity, housing thousands who had nowhere else to go, while supply chains struggled to deliver food, water, and medical aid. The storm's impact extended into Louisiana, where additional rainfall compounded existing flooding issues, spreading the crisis across state lines. Meanwhile, first responders worked around the clock in dangerous conditions, navigating debris-filled waters and unstable structures to reach those in need. The sheer persistence of the storm created a sense of helplessness, as there was no clear end in sight and little time to recover between waves of rainfall. Harvey had effectively transformed from a powerful hurricane into a prolonged flooding catastrophe, redefining the scale of disaster unfolding across the region. By the time the rain finally began to ease in early September 2017, the landscape had been fundamentally altered, and the full scope of destruction was only beginning to come into focus, setting the stage for a recovery process that would prove just as complex and devastating as the storm itself. In the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, the scale of destruction across Texas and Louisiana became painfully clear as floodwaters slowly receded and revealed entire communities in ruins. Streets once filled with life were now lined with debris, soaked furniture, and the remnants of homes that could no longer be salvaged. For many residents in Houston and Southeast Texas, the return home was not a relief, but a confrontation with loss, as interiors were coated in mud, walls warped, and the air thick with the smell of mold. Insurance claims surged into the hundreds of thousands, yet a large portion of affected households discovered they lacked flood coverage, leaving them financially exposed in ways they had never anticipated. The economic impact rippled outward, disrupting local businesses, shutting down operations, and forcing layoffs that added another layer of hardship to already struggling families. Schools remained closed for extended periods, delaying education for tens of thousands of students and turning recovery into a prolonged disruption of daily life. Health concerns escalated as contaminated water left behind bacteria and toxins, increasing the risk of illness in crowded shelters and damaged neighborhoods. Volunteers from across the nation arrived in waves, forming grassroots networks that helped gut homes, distribute supplies, and provide emotional support to those in shock. Federal assistance, led by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, began to flow, but the sheer volume of need created delays and frustration among residents desperate for immediate help. Long lines formed at aid centers, and temporary housing solutions struggled to keep pace with the demand as displaced families searched for stability. The housing market tightened dramatically, driving up rental prices and pushing vulnerable populations into even more precarious situations. Legal battles soon emerged as homeowners questioned flood management decisions, particularly the release of water from key reservoirs that had intensified downstream flooding. These disputes highlighted deeper issues in urban planning and infrastructure, exposing how rapid development in flood-prone zones had amplified the disaster's impact. Environmental consequences also surfaced, with reports of chemical leaks from industrial sites, raising concerns about long-term contamination in soil and waterways. The cleanup process proved grueling, as crews worked to remove millions of tons of debris while battling lingering moisture that fueled widespread mold growth. Mental health challenges became increasingly visible, with survivors experiencing anxiety, stress, and trauma long after the physical storm had passed. Community organizations stepped in to provide counseling and support, recognizing that recovery extended far beyond rebuilding structures. Over time, policymakers began re-evaluating disaster preparedness strategies, pushing for updated flood maps, stricter building codes, and improved drainage systems designed to handle extreme rainfall. Investments in infrastructure became a central focus, as officials sought to reduce the risk of another catastrophic flooding event on the same scale. Public awareness shifted as well, with residents gaining a deeper understanding of flood risk and the importance of preparedness in a changing climate. Despite these efforts, the road to recovery remained uneven, with some neighborhoods rebuilding quickly while others lagged behind due to financial and logistical barriers. Years after 2017, traces of the disaster could still be seen in empty lots, rebuilt homes elevated above ground level, and communities permanently altered by what they had endured. Harvey left behind more than physical damage. It reshaped policy, exposed systemic vulnerabilities, and forced a reckoning with how cities prepare for extreme weather in the modern era. And even as rebuilding continues, one question still lingers with unsettling weight: whether the lessons learned will be enough when the next storm inevitably arrives. The story of Hurricane Harvey is more than a disaster. It is a warning etched into the history of the United States. It exposed weaknesses in infrastructure, tested the limits of emergency response, and changed how millions view flood risk forever. Even years later, its impact still echoes through rebuilt neighborhoods and policy changes across Texas. The question now is not if another storm will come, but when and whether we will be ready. If this breakdown gave you new insight into one of the most devastating events in modern history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories.